All right, good morning. We'll start with President Geshe. Since to my Guru and protector Geshe upholds his heart the scriptural texts embodied of the sins of things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun unclouded by the defilements or traces, who teaches in 60 ways with the patient love of Father for his only Son. All creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. Uses random combination of the Dharma arises in the stupor of delusion, tying chains of our karma, whose powerful sword of wisdom few start suffering wherever its sprites appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. I entreat you, my Geshe, whose body is adorned with 112 marks of the Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O my Geshe, along with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate darkness and close in mind. Enlighten intelligence and wisdom that are making insight into the Buddha and the Buddha.
Sanji chudan soji chunan la chanchu bari dani kyabsinji lagi chishi gibe zonan dolan benchi sanji dhruva shu Sanji chudan soji chunan la chanchu bari dani kyabsinji lagi chishi gibe zonan dolan benchi sanji dhruva shu Sanji chudan soji chunan la chanchu bari dani kyabsinji lagi chishi gibe zonan dolan benchi sanji dhruva shu Kangi tozi nizungi tawa tamji pambi chere kangi chunu kyunzi padam kela chanzi lo Good morning everyone. Takazi nazu changi Geshe tamji chusu base Sikche bilang sehingga semua bahasa Tsultrim. Dan Devi yut semua bahasa kecil Tsultrim dalam di tamji chusu biasa Tsultrim sarasra.
In cultivating physical isolation in order to rid ourselves of attachment, we yesterday finished looking at a section that explained the disadvantages of attachment in point E that came under the heading it causes one to waste the leisures and endowment. So we've covered that section before. Let's just look briefly at the commentary to see what Geshe Rinchen says. By thinking exclusively about the objects of desire, this life will pass meaninglessly and the power of the freedoms and endowments will be exhausted or will be wasted.
Tanju cholas mandroya karchi gores. 아니 단줄 때는 야지 아니 또 가르줄 두고 그랬어 디 제와 디 인지지 거기다 생각하라 단줄 때는 야지 아니 드로시엔 캐버도 파워지 먼저 미지 아니 단줄 때는 가르줄 두고 그랬어 라운디 소디 냉이 넘버지기 남주기 셔럽 좀 두야지 데려다스라 냉이 넘버지기 남주기 셔럽 여봐야나 아니 가리나 좀 두겠지 남주기 셔럽 만나마나 좀더 찍어 dinji chi ani rangye shenjung ge shorji chadam mo so shawang jode ji ma to be ani kan yong me ba chagan za ani na ju dinji ki on the ma so ba ani woni ngang ji ten le ya ani le ni na ba ji nam ji shero tun tu ni ba di ya ba di ani ten go tu ro di thola ta ni ni se dire da ra.
So on the surface, it seems that the meaning of this section is quite easy, right? It's easy to understand, but then we still need to think of the meaning of not wasting, which means not putting to waste our freedoms and endowments. What do we need to do in order to ensure that we do not put to waste our freedoms and richnesses? Well, we need to make them meaningful. We need to make the most out of our freedoms and richnesses. And to make our freedoms and richnesses become meaningful, we need to recognize what is special about us as human beings comparing to other living beings, like, for example, in comparison with animals, for example. So our special abilities in terms of developing discerning wisdom that can well distinguish between what is positive and what is negative, what is right and what is not right. So this is a special ability that we have as human beings. And if we do not utilize our ability for developing special wisdom, what difference will there be between ourselves and other living beings such as animals? There would be not much different. So if we still continue as human beings to behave under the influence of our afflictive states of mind, anger, attachment, and ignorance, if we still continue with an attitude of cherishing ourselves at the expense of others, seeking our own victory, even if it comes at the expense of others, for that long, we're not going to be using our particular ability to develop intelligence, discerning wisdom that can well distinguish between what is right and what is wrong. So if we do not do that, then this is what Shantideva means here when he says that we're going to put to waste our freedoms and richnesses.
아니 또 드셔는 마송과 가쇼니 아니 게 가긴 치슈데 가인 바데 문제지니 아니 디 doctor 쪼르지 손데도 왔으라.
And also we keep in mind the context of the 8th chapter of Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva of Life, which teaches how to develop absorption. So what we practice, what is to be accomplished, is calm abiding. But rather than going straight into explaining how you cultivate calm abiding, here Shantideva takes another approach. He explains what you need to do in order to rid yourself, first of all, of the conditions that are not conducive for cultivating calm abiding. So this is what you need to do in order to remove conditions which are not conducive with calm abiding.
And the Jasajum Shola took the 아니 장난 수수고 꽤 문제 최고야지 개체슈가 꽤 빵발이야 꽤 문제 최고야 가샤가 발이야 가샤 문제 최고야 그래서 아니 자스좀 쉬어라고 때 믹스기 아니 sabde 난chen 송샤게서 차기도스가 아니 상황을 델이야 콘트롤돼서 아니 벤르출딩 왜 쇼차면 아니 가쇼니 비기 like 가샤가 발이야 가샤 문제 최고야 아니 캠빵 발이야 캠 문제 최고야 그래서 아니 송이 콘투서 쪼디 야스용 시어리 쇼야 콘투 송도스라.
So what Shantideva is saying here is that we need to be able to recognize our own faults. This is what it comes down to. The ability to recognize our own faults, and it's so important. It is of the most important thing to be able to recognize our own shortcomings. So we need to recognize the faults. We need to recognize what we oppose. We need to recognize what we negate. All of those different things need to be understood. And this is something that you find also in the writing of the 17 Pandits of Nalanda, in emphasizing the importance of recognizing what is to be negated, what is to be opposed, recognizing the faults. And this is also what Shantideva hinges on here when he speaks about the faults of attachment.
간지 랭이 남아지비 남주들이야 두 대샤스 라 먼저 냠는 집이 나야 랭이 남아지비 남주고야지 라 마도지 땅아주 근데 최저로 되지 소소에 남주매 봐이나 이게 아니 대박장장 거는 보고에는 미윤주트에 가우슈렌다스라 아니 조디 더발이야 슈르카리야 조디 비비 라울로니치 라 스페인은 좀어스네 라울로니치 조 성전에다 공변은 안 직장에서 소고 리얼데미야 직 메토피어를 소고 대초 그저 아무 슈이 사도요만 디인지기 아니 퓨고야스 개요마로스 안 뒤신 켜버지 딘들이야 아니 루루치 아니 메토토스 비야 장마치 비마도 지금 님마 딱 발이야 근데 그저 아무 스탄데바나 디 지단데 야버데는 디 롬니 치엘 누구는 이미 샤고 해지래다스로 이것도 샤로치.
And this is what we need to develop through our practice. We need to develop discerning wisdom that can well discern between what is positive, what is negative, what is right, and what is not right. This is the goal of our practice. So without developing discerning wisdom, we might be living here at this center, and our approach might be based on faith, but still without developing our own inner wisdom that can well discern what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad, we're not going to be able to accomplish to accomplish our goals if we just base our approach on faith. So it's important to look at the things that we do, because in living here, our goal is to make sure that we study and reflect upon the Buddha's teachings. So particularly when you think of living here as monastics, it's really important that we develop an understanding of the training that we need to take up, that we develop an understanding of them through study, reflection, and so forth. So we have other things that we need to do here at the center. So we do some cleanings, and we also make flowers offerings and so forth. And all of those different things are good. They're important. But then when you start to look at your priorities and how much time you spend on doing different activities, if you find that the majority of your time is spent on cleaning and making offerings and so forth, then in that sense, studying and reflecting become incidental, then the priorities are not set right. So it's not to say that it's not good to make offerings, it's good. We do them, it's good to do them, particularly during special days, during holidays. It's good to do them, it's important to do them. And if we can do them also daily, that's good. But then if we do them daily and it comes at the cost of developing a study and reflection, then our priorities are not the right priority. So it's important to look at that and make sure that we sort out our priorities. And even if we don't make those extensive offerings every day, but we then focus on study, reflection, and so forth, it's okay.
Which Jace?
Yeah, Jace?
It seems like you're sort of saying
So I didn't hear you well.
It seems like on the side of the Dharma, that's an offering as well.
So it seems that when we study the Dhamma, that's an offering as well. Just on Chuba Priya di Pinangatso Kabdila Chu Lobjun Chedu Pesheta Dian Chuba Yan Tit Chogre was.
Yes. Yeah, shit.
Yeah.
Best.
Yeah, that's best offering.
Today, when I trasalato, special task lonely daily chasa chagores. Chasa ya any town number 2 metal tap for chogolas. Kazna metal tabaina tizu tangoros. So near chialia, gorgin chickens, metal double for jalchogomaris. And chase big not sell chivalia, long use subden devanza. Sergi Tula Kanaya, the losser da, Tuchi cabbage injuria, any metal position. Yunding metal yomaris. Yoncho Samaya, which and young Kavkalayachi, Choba did the Shanshinero. Choba Shama in the Tanganzo, and it's Pisco in the dust, Tiji, Samachini, Yapuelo, Mother, Metal, Nimata, what is it, metal, Jivokia, metal, the Chimaris. The Machini, Lauloni, Toby on Dinky, Nebulus, Tassani, and it's something material, Gagin, something material, summer, and Tassan Lonichin temple. The soon is a metal, Legadi, Kitchen Sagiomaris. Is it near Lareto Casina, Calcalea, and in also touch kingdom and dear Manchiaji, and lawyers, Lega Mambu Shuchawana, and Nangala Suzuki, and Chonjutaya, Lamron Taya, and the Kando Gage, to some of Pizuka, and it's Lega Mazina Midigo, Chena Kalekajuros, Pijit Kashi Drichago series. So in the same Chigo Maris. Metal and Samsung, so concerned that and I give you Kadia, and Medol in me, Yapu Mother, Nimatawa, those two go master, can Zutrola. Really, which period, John. Some Yabu standard. And Gomba the Sama Shago to until Gomba Yapush, go over Samaya, until Gomba Yapush and something in the Jawat Kadina years ago. Tina on the Indian and Kajiton, dream of the mother, pay and Pina. In a Christian Naloya, and she look Shambatoli, and the Plaga Katsupi Tabatus. And another number Chiba in the Tame and Winam or Dusugi, Lagantus Katsupi Tabatus, and Nanzu Loship Ship get over the and she Lagantapcha model, Shamatu Yadi. Carcias drop. This is sound down. In the end, that the treasure is. Can you do the counter and the give you a chill, Lalu, Junju, Lamano, Yavijan, Metal Kitchen Maris, Indeed, Kaleka Maris.
Geshe is saying that from his own experience of having lived for 24/7 and years at Sarah Monastery. So the goal or your objective when you live in such a big monastery is to focus on study, reflection, and meditation, to focus on your training. That's the main emphasis that is put, or that's the main priority that monks take up in their activities. So no one actually grows flowers. It's not that you set some time aside to grow flowers, to take care of flowers so that you can make offerings to them or to sort out flowers. Those things are done every once in a while in special events. So you might decorate the main prayer hall or prayers hall with flowers and other offerings during the Tibetan New Year or during Buddhist holidays. But apart from that, you keep things simple. So when you make offerings of water bowls. You can make offerings of biscuits and other things on your altar. Of course, if you do have flowers, you can offer them, but it's not that you need to set some time aside in order to either grow the flowers and go out to get flowers or sort out all those different things in order to make offerings. Those things are done completely incidental. So not only that, also there are incredible teachers, spiritual friends at Sarah Monastery, and also their main focus is on teaching the training, right? Teaching the practices that monks need to take up. So looking at what we do here at the center. So first of all, our monastic community is not big. Not only we have a small monastic community, most of us are getting old, right? We're not young. So then in the time that we have left, then it's good to, when we sort out our priorities, Geshe feels that it's good to make sure that the priority in terms of the time that we spend is spent in studying, for example, the states of the path of enlightenment, the Lamrim, Shantideva's guide to Bodhisattva way of life, and so forth. Now, of course, we have other things happening here at the center, but if you get to the point in which you're doing so many other things that make you so tired, and then you cannot then study well the states of the path of enlightenment and Shantideva's guide to Bodhisattva way of life, how does it actually work to benefit you? So it's really important then to keep in mind that we don't need to feel kind of completely stressed or uptight or completely burdened if we are not going to be able to create this massive presentation of offerings every day. The main emphasis, the main priority should be on one's study and reflection. So we need to study well. And of course, together with that, we want to keep this Gompa clean. We want to maintain it well. Of course, this is important. Geshe is not kind of saying that we need to neglect it. This is important. But still, we need to make sure that in our approach to what we do, we need to make sure that we cultivate conditions which are conducive for our training. So looking at Queensland, for example, there are different temples and places of worship belonging to different religions or spiritual traditions. Some of them are Buddhist. When you look at Vietnamese temples or Thai temples, some of them are really well set up, much better than us. And you might wonder, why is it so? But anyway, Geshe said that we've been a little bit sidetracked. Right? We're kind of speaking about maybe things that we, shouldn't be speaking of. So anyway, that's what that's the point that Geshe was wanting to make.
Dili dinza ani ngan samzala ya chobpya kichimbo and long so from kitab sungores chobpya kichimbo and je medopya kichimbo sungores di kichimbo res ine di song sa di tingan injing singo des kala sungdu kap kala sungdu yo kala sungdu di injing singo des mado pile chi song di ta ti injing di chi ko chego so di so devana 아니 라밍 공부 연투고 말이스. 라. 안줄럼이 잠무퉁이. 칸도엔 게주 야고 제무퉁이. 아니 지 비기게 가서 자지 셈마기를 차든 딘디여 봐나. 아니 공부를 메도프 초보프 어딘지 제바이나. 다리 세 야슈데레스. 라. 아니 비기 빼쳤다 퉁이 로종 제퉁이기 아니 로종 마치어지 아니 메도는 거 거대바나. 라마 소르지 싸우니 퉁이 말이스. 초지자와 세드치고 투닝 말이스. 아도 그냥 또 고모는 됐어요 지야. 나도 고모는 강에 여봐 미디기. 왜나 지금 겐덴 바이나 겐덴 나도 비고 통부야 그렇지. 아니 비리야 지 겐진 거름 지어라스. 먼저 이게 dombo인자 그 겐진 거름 양치. 라. 딘디 세바는 다간 쳐버렸어. 뒷자원이 내봐. 나로 비리야 지 दो दिशा की सोच छे एंड मैं तो खरफी देवाना जब इन छब दो मारस तो और दी से तक हसो दंगे के जो मांग रसो कांजी दी तुला सारा चीज So Kyabje Lama Sovereign Bashir does emphasize the importance of making offerings and so forth. But then often when we hear about Lama Zopa Rinpoche's advice, we need to give it a certain context. We need to think about the people that Lama Zopa Rinpoche is giving the advice to. Who are the people that were given those, such advice? What was the context of this advice? In what place that advice was given? At what time or situation that advice was given? If you don't look at the context of a certain advice and you think that whatever Lama Zopa Rinpoche is saying is applicable to each and every situation, to each and every person, you're going to miss out on the meaning of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's advice. You're not going to be able to get Lama Zopa Rinpoche's advice. So we have different, as we said, we have different contexts for different advice. So if you are capable of studying, contemplating, and through that to follow your training, then do that. If you're incapable of doing it to a certain degree,
And yet you find that your mind is unhappy, your mind is disturbed, and it makes your mind peaceful or more relaxed when you come into a temple and you make offerings, you offer flowers and so forth. That's good. That's a good thing to do. But then if you have the capacity, if you have the ability to study and develop your mind, to develop your understanding, to develop your training, but rather than doing that, you get most of the time you spend on making offerings, sourcing out flowers and so forth, you're missing out on the main point. Not only that, Geshe reckons that if you do have the ability to study and undertake training, and yet you do not do that, instead of that you focus on making offerings and so forth, Geshe reckons that even Lama Zopa Rinpoche would not be pleased with that kind of approach. If you have the ability to do it and you choose not to do it, it's not going to make Lama Zopa Rinpoche be pleased with you. It's not going to make the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions be completely pleased with you. So we have here at this center, this Gompa, we have a small Sangha community. So maintaining harmony between one another and also treating each other with a sense of respect, following the codes of monastics, such as, for example, junior monastics, respecting senior monastics and so forth. Those are the things that we can take into a practice, and that in itself constitutes making of offering. So if you do not make sure that you take that into your practice, you keep your heart be made of stone, right? So you have your heart is made of stone, but you're still making offerings. There's not a lot of benefit that you will get from that. Not a lot will be achieved at the end of the day. Now, if you can do everything, if you can study, if you can train in virtue, if you can practice, if you can make offering of flowers, if you keep everything clean, and you can do all of it, excellent. Geshe is rejoicing in your ability. Sorry? Yeah.
And Chavi mission Pamba, Shadang mission Pamba, Slashoras, Pambalini, Niemi Sambatan, Tepom Sun, Pambu Nimi Sambalini, gave a shave of Tendo, Pambu gave a shave of Sun, Ten Chamber Gigi, Nandra Tibatans, Chivi Top, Medici, Temper Kavatan, Tele Pemba Maturji, Never Jaws.
Having said that, let's go back to the text. We're looking at abandoning the class of things incongruous with common abiding. First off, in abandoning the bustle of the world, we are now looking at point B, which explains the way to abandon this. Now, we've covered the first point in the method for developing the antidote, which speaks of the disadvantages of attachment as part of abandoning attachment to sentient beings. Let's look at a second point, which is abandoning them by knowing the disadvantages. So abandoning this attachment by knowing the disadvantages of attachment. But in the same token, you can say you abandon anger through knowing the disadvantages of anger. You abandon hostility through knowing the disadvantages of hostility. So this point is divided into two sections, reflecting on the disadvantages and the way to abandon them. When we look at the extensive explanation of the reflection of the disadvantages of attachment, it says it destroys what could otherwise be very meaningful and leads one to the lower realms. Do not rely on the company of childlike people and the difficulty of doing so. And the third point is one does not obtain any benefit from it, but rather receives harm.
There is the Tambo Ten Chembo Jigi, not the was. The Ten Chembo Jigati, Ten Chembo Kardinal, the Dubjat Katubati, and the Chishu Derawas. When you Dubjat Katubati, how the Tanji can be compounded was. And it, that how the Tanji can be compound, and it Druviadi, and it do to meva, do chagin to Zoila, and it do to meva, should do about Tindiji Chawanada, 아니 자와 셴바 가르지 제거해야 되냐 디 수술이야 내 소마도 페마스 왔을 진짜 아니 간지 자와 가르치어야 되냐 능아 이승이 자와 가르치기가 봐야 간지 먼저 주자 타도가 타와 탐지기고 공만이야 만내 봐지 제태발이야 파트 맞아 봐지 제투 고고랬다 제투 고다 계지 마토나야 만내 봐지 제거해 이 패키지를 붙여서 있어 제거했다
Well, we begin with the first point, which says that the disadvantage of attachment is it destroys what could otherwise be very meaningful and leads one to the lower realms. What is meaningful, what is of great meaning, is the state of liberation and the state of enlightenment. This is what we pursue in our practice. This is the great meaning. So through such afflictive states of mind, we lose that great meaning. It destroys that. So we might lose sight. We might not be able to pursue that. We might not be able to recognize that. So in whatever we do, it's not going to, if we lose sight of that great benefit, in whatever we do in terms of a practice, it's not going to bring us benefit. It could only bring us harm. So with our actions of body, speech, and mind, we want to make sure that we do not harm our attainment of liberation and our attainment of the state of enlightenment. We want to make sure that our physical, verbal, and mental activity do not obstruct the development of the path that leads to liberation and omniscience. If we cannot contribute to the state of liberation or the state of omniscience, at the very least, we want to avoid from undermining, from harming the paths that lead to those states.
네, 자연나무야다. 따바 매긴 자식이 용도 최근 지고체세. 라 어디를 딱간지 난도 그 다치 차베 온 손체. 아니 지딱 난도라 자식이 민다지로 아니 자식이 민다지. 아니 주주 참아 대당대 저러서. 인지긴 자식이 원의 단위이 이때 롱치 이때 쳐버지. 소수 이 받대와이나 디톤츠 아니 수수기 샘래야 팬도여가 수수 남주 야기로야 핑규여나다 아니 이네 자시드 고고래야 팀해발이야 랑기 남주 야기로야 아니 고긴 지딩이 아니 딱부 템부 메비기 아니 troll 템바이나 탈 가리용 것이는지 용종치 아니 교메바 아니 탈비 공방 토발이야 가긴 지그래 탈비 공방디 지그치그래.
So looking at the 6 lines covered by these points, we begin with the second half of verse number 8. It says, friends and relatives lacking permanence will even destroy the everlasting Dharma. So friends and relatives, those who are close to our heart, are impermanent. They're not everlasting phenomena. And while we think that there is something that is reliable and stable about them, they're not stable. They're not things that can be relied upon because they are impermanent. And through our attitude towards them, we destroy the everlasting Dharma. So, of course, in order to attain the state of liberation or the state of omniscience, which is this everlasting Dharma, in the sense that those states are the states that will continue on to the future once you attain them, we do need friends and relatives that support us in order to attain those states. But then, if rather than having friends and relatives which are conducive to the attainment of liberation or the state of enlightenment, if we develop a sense of attachment to them so that that becomes an adverse condition, a hindrance for attaining the state of liberation or the state of omniscience, Shantideva says that it will even destroy the everlasting Dharma.
이래서다 니는 딱바 매바세티 지단 딱바 매바세티 아니 메딱바야 쿠고레 메딱바 세마 딱바 매바세마 근데 지바레 니 까우까우야 딱바 매바세티 메딱바 썸이야 차오 마인바 아니 이데므로 지단가 메딱바 인자 이데므로 세고데미야 그냥 아주 아니 미지기 바이나 아니 미 and the mini Yonshoras, Michig the Tembu, and Loke Chosa, and Michig the Pai Yavuchena, and Su and Marab something, Hakandolchena, Suniki dingy, and it Tembu many Dingoras. Tapa never said it, and Tembu never. So this Yigdem Moralia, Kodas.
Shantideva in this verse refers to friends and relatives which lack permanence. When we say that something lacks permanence, what we infer is that the very thing is impermanent. But here it's not just that they're impermanent. There is another thing that we reflect upon in relation to lacking permanence. The meaning that we reflect upon is that they cannot be relied upon. They're unreliable, unstable, and unreliable. It's just like saying that if you might engage with two people, one of them might be completely trustworthy, a stable person, a reliable person, so that you can entrust yourself to that person. Another person might be not reliable, not stable. You might entrust yourself to that person, but they will treat you in an ill manner. You might benefit that person, but they will respond in harming you. So that person is not stable, or in a sense that the person is not to be relied upon. And this is the meaning that we can apply to what Shantideva says here. Friends and relatives lack permanence. Not only they're impermanent, but also not things that can be relied upon. And it continues to verse 9, which says, if I behave in the same way as those equal in fortune to the childish, I will certainly proceed to lower realms. If I'm led there to those unequal in fortune, what is the use of entrusting myself to the childish?
Cheba said, the Lander machine, Lady Namjim, and it the Chadang, Chadang Chodi, and it Shaman the Kurting in the Lea, called the Cheba Sigos. That indeed the Yamva, and it and Langichi, and it Yam Tang, and Tig Kanlavaya, Muntin, Dravina, and colleagues non lady mother, and it Zawani Suzuki, Namju, and it Yagin the two Maris. And it Nandrodi, and it coming about Chichena, Chevatembichis, these are indigenous, and it trout indigenous tempi, golden cardos. So a keeping Chimeva, Pashamala Pentomari, Sosole Pentomari, Sosole Pematomas, naked in Gilead, and it's the Ledichin, trout and Jovan, golden was. The Chappy Wangi, trout and Tindrich mother fishing in Maris, Hinza and Chappy Nimi, so Chappy Nimi, the Chavidos.
Shantideva says here, if I behave in the same way as those equal in fortune to the childish. Equal in fortune to the childish refers to behaving in the same way as those who do not have discerning wisdom that can well discern what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. Those who are greatly affected by the partiality of anger and attachment. So if I behave in the same way as those who are strongly affected by the partiality of anger and attachment, those that haven't developed wisdom that can well discern between what is right and wrong, not only I behave in the same way, I entrust myself to those people and I keep close association with those people, how it's going to help me in terms of developing my own wisdom. Not only I will not be developing my own wisdom, also this close association with such friends will certainly proceed to the lower realms. That would be the result that I will attain at the end. Not only I will not develop my wisdom, but I would also proceed to the lower realms. If I'm led there to those unequal in fortune, what use of entrusting myself to the childish? So what is the use of entrusting myself to the harm of the attachment? Not only doesn't benefit me, it is harmful. So don't entrust yourself to attachment. Such are the faults of attachment.
The sick tamadi the seal you get the Shepherd Denby said, Shepherd Denby said, Shepherd D, and be Suzuki of Tamawata, Chadang Shang Chudin, but Dilashani, Telepath, Lutena, Luten, Yichin, Benata, and the Chagwe Shang Juli, Kang Chawachis and Yulapa, and Luten graduates, but Dindi, and it Dembaina, and Suzula Su. Kevinski Rayo Maris. Madoyan Cheva Suzuki or came machine engineer, Chip and a Rovachin, Chambuchin, Droyat, Tea, Chining Marsegoman, indeed Traumatis Lagomaras. Collier, Lieutenant Rovana, and young English. As a Koranki and Kiki Shingmans, Koran Mashi Wangi, Karen Drogi over the and the Rovaya denazation, Ting Drogoras, or the indigenous Songosaris.
Shantideva says at the end of verse number 9, what is the use of entrusting myself to the childish? Childish are ordinary sentient beings which are affected by the partiality of anger and attachment. So Shantideva says that it's not beneficial to entrust yourself to those who are governed by the partiality of anger and attachment. Now, it doesn't say that you shouldn't help others. So you might encounter someone that is that needs something, someone that you might treat that person with a sense of affection. Shantideva doesn't say here that you shouldn't do that. If you can help someone, if you can treat them with a sense of care and affection, then do that. But if you completely entrust yourself to that person, it's like standing at the edge of an abyss. You're only going to fall down with them, rather than benefiting yourself.
Then driven on your do tell the double maybe Zashikis. In give young Tabatan, get to the top Tambi chicken, Jig Yamber Gila, Cheva the Kawan Yamber, Tadata, Choban Tumba Journal, and Never Mountain Road, Yurdi, Pavanonga, Padam Milutavatan, Kawaman Yamber Tiberchena, Cheva Suzuki, then be Chishicha, Dedem Meluche. The
commentary says friends and relatives who are without permanence, in that one will quickly be separated from them, destroying degenerate, even eternal liberation and the method for achieving, meaning the holy Dharma. If one acts on the same level as the childish, then one will definitely go to the low realms. If one is led by the childish to fortune unequal to the fortune of superior beings and those that have a human body, then what is supposed to be accomplished by relying on ordinary individuals? One will not achieve one's wishes, and that which one does not wish for will increase.
That's heavy recommendation. Can you do that individually and the Chigiomaris? Heavy recommendation. And Temba Kavanis.
So Shantideva says here, do not rely upon someone like that, in a sense that do not entrust yourself to someone like that. They are not suitable person to rely upon. So do not rely on the company of the childlike people and the difficulty of doing so.
Goyachik, Gawayon, Chiadi, Kalakawa Shujiras, Penata, 7 and Sunday, Kechik chicken, Zakula, Yuzumkin, Daingu, Gavinella, Trochepe, Suzuki Wongo Gas.
Not only the instruction that Shantideva gives here is to not rely upon those childlike people, but also if you do so, and you try to please them, you'll find it really hard. So one moment they are friends, and in a while they become enemies. Since they become angry, even at a source of joy, it is difficult to please ordinary ordinary people. Nigaloimbe.
이걸로면
Okay.
됐다. 디 오늘로 왔다. 먼저 빨리 데스키 아니 지 가초죠. 라 아니 데스키 그 남주된 단상을 때 아니 둘초죠. 람사 마가와지 장기도에디 먼저 수수기 오고 장식 소리를 라 데니지 오늘 단이 가외와지 아니 Geshe nanda, ani pigi lega chenanda, karcheva inaya, he tsalia, ani be, ani magawa chedech, chagdo chedech, jensam chedech, dini wars, these are Suzuki or ya pigi, any chick, lieutenant, joyadi, any chick, pendor duet, the Kalakawa shoot, raise, song shurgos, the guess, Chemushala.
We as ordinary sentient beings are so easily, our mind is made easily glad, but also it changes quickly and we become unhappy. Right? So our mind and also our physical expression, our facial expression easily change, swiftly change. One moment we're happy, next moment we're being displeased. So if you entrust yourself to someone that changes so quickly, even if you're trying to maintain a positive attitude, you're trying in your speech to speak nicely, with your physical expression, with the way that you behave, you try to behave in a way that is helpful, they might still react with being displeased. They might be unhappy. They might be jealous. They might have a sense of competitiveness. If you always try to make them happy, what benefit you will get from that? There's not much benefit when you entrust yourself or rely upon beings that can change so easily.
Only handsome Kunilan, then a handsome summer number Kunilan, that's known to show you and known to not do the Slavana. And it Kondrosada. Suzu, that you kill Suzu Montoya, any summer number who's generation in the year, Kondrose. Pendosevana, he Lelia, never cheat. And that Marav Kojanchin, to Law the that one in Niaguaj Mara, that the Mania Baina, and in Condrosa, Maga Chede, but did it Pemberman, Troje, Dajatin, Doverty, Hedan now, the Mania, Trojan on the doors.
So you might be trying to help someone and they respond with anger. You might be kind to them, they respond in being unkind to you. You might try to offer an advice and they do not pay heed to your advice. So Shantideva says here, looking at the next verse, number 11, they're angry when something of benefit is said, and they also turn me away from benefit. If I do not listen to what they say, becoming angry, they will proceed to lower realms.
She give me tempest because that's December temple never. Kejiki, Zawar Bella, singing Jones, maybe use some cheeky, giant devatons, Gavin Gavala Jonaya, Torch Chebi, Cheva Suzuki or Go Kala. Rama Pemberman, Trochechi, Temas, Dardan. Tamatsu, Pembi, Gavali, Dovacella. Tedaki Nan Manina. $100.
The commentary to these two verses says, as their mental continuum is unstable, they become friends in an instant, but in the mere moment it takes to say some bad words, they become enemies again. As they become angry if one brings them into contact with virtue, which is likable, ordinary individuals are difficult to please. Not only do they become angry if one says something beneficial in many ways, they will also turn oneself away from the beneficial cause that is virtue. If one does not listen to the words, they become angry and go to the lower realms.
Yeah.
So, Anijachen is asking, I led a meditation on trying to overcome laziness. Is our attachment to sensory objects, etc., another form of laziness? Lelo tolo samo tamo inarwa. Ani duin la chakwa chewa ina. Chakwa che di an lelo gi rik chirves.
Res.
Yeah, attachment to sensory objects can also see to be a form of laziness. So of the types of laziness that we've covered before, we have laziness of being attracted to ignoble activities. So our attachment to sensory objects is paired up with laziness of being attracted to ignoble activities.
That's Zumba tele pemba mitulchi. Never Jovanis, Chadang tele, Chadang di Shan Kirchi, Kanji, Chadang gi Chosu Joina, and Suzulaya Pembachi, Kaduna, Mato Master, and it's Nevi Nelia, Jojoris, and Chado, Takarchi said, Tola Chado, Yamdan Jen, Malanga ye, Turner Te, Many Jonan Konduji, Namshik Chile Pembatops.
Then the next point, point C, comes under the heading of one does not obtain any benefit from it, but rather receives harm. So if you rely on anger and attachment, not only it will not help you, it will harm you. So first off, verse number 12 says, they are envious of superiors, competitive with equals, and proud towards inferiors. They are conceited when praised, and if anything unpleasant is said, they get angry. When is any benefit obtained from the childish?
The thing on the young daughters, on the Memon Cheshi, and it tucked down, P. Jansen down, and it Nargit, and it control shoot Chion, any so Makiva Mase, and Chili Mission Baina, Makiva, and Susu Nesagri, Sobot now and it's Sobot the Madiva Chia, and Lega changing by Lega Chemading Soya. To some law, and Chado than Jansen than Narget than Kondu de Zonk, Yungudas Rat. Inia Suzulia Pilia, Narget. Chado, Shukshembo, Shuji Yavania, and the general mission of a coach, Thunderbe, Suzula Mendon was there. The Dickansina cook in Niger Chado Kundro said, Bashala Soba di, never said the love the Yahoo Maris love the Amjona, Salman Kochi. In a D. Dugja Yabadi, and Suzu Yugi, and in the just said the Chado Soba the Winzen Tipa. And Jomiagi, Tabla Matamachi, those and the Mitzibrosadi, then the Kaduina, and she Sozuli Toalena, and Chadosa deata, Nyambale and Jansen Chidea, Mavale and Tonchunda, and she Sozunagi there, and this chick, and be Namguri, digital Nansan Controsato deadi, Diredas Ra.
As it says, when is any benefit obtained from the childish? So sometimes we have anger or attachment, jealousy arises, pride, a sense of competitiveness with others. Not only they make our mind unhappy, they also make people next to us in our surrounding, it makes them unhappy. It makes the community or the group that we belong to unhappy. Whatever task or job we are trying to accomplish cannot be accomplished when we're being subject to those afflictive states of mind. So it is not only harmful to us, but it is also harmful to others around us. So when those afflictive states of mind arise strongly in a mind, we might be controlled by strong anger and attachment and pride and so forth. Rather than seeing the faults of these afflictive states of mind, we start to criticize others. So we might criticize others for various reasons, but we hardly ever look at our own faults. We pretend as if we are free from the fault of anger, attachment, pride, jealousy, competitiveness, and so forth. And most of the things that we do is we become critical of others. We might have had a lot about the drawbacks of anger and jealousy and pride and so forth. We have had those that described to us many times before, and yet often we do not make a genuine attempt to eliminate our own afflictive states of mind. When a situation arises, we become proud over those who we see as inferior to us. We develop a sense of competitiveness with others. We become unhappy with jealousy when others get the upper hand. As soon as something slight changes, we become angry. Our facial expressions, our body language becomes aggressive as soon as a slight thing happens. And when we are controlled by strong anger and attachment, pride, jealousy, and so forth, the company that we will keep would be those who are compatible with that. The only people that will be able to maintain relationship with are people that have corresponding states of mind. Those that have more positive states of mind, it will be difficult to hold on to relationship with them if we are controlled by strong anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, and so forth. So in that sense, our afflictive states of mind not only destroy others, but they also destroy us. They destroy ourselves and others. So therefore, since all these faults are attributed to anger and attachment, jealousy, pride, and so forth, we always want to see the faults in those states of mind. Rather than focusing on the faults of others and becoming critical of others, we want to recognize the faults of our own afflictive states of mind. So then the next verse says, through associating with the childish, non-virtue will certainly ensue, such as praising myself and belittling others and discussing the joys of cyclic existence.
초 집에 젠라 닥되지 젠라 메바타 야보다 유무소 콘가위 땅로소 마가와 지금 이번 좀 유에 제보다 조금 미자오스
Yeah. Kind of talking about myself. Yeah. Okay. The commentary to this section says further, the childish are jealous of those higher, compete with those who are equal. And if they observe those that are lower, they are proud. When praised, they generate conceit. But if one says something unpleasant, they become angry. Hence, when does one receive benefit from involvement with the childish? Not only does one not, but what one virtue does one not acquire by keeping company with the childish? One will definitely take on praising oneself and criticizing others, so get in the habit of conversation that takes pleasure in cyclic existence, such as stories to deal with the king, the people in the country, and so forth. Therefore, one should not associate with the childish.
That is, the than sent temper, then point yourself, kanji, to divina, and it shadangi, king to the never to the shadangi wangi, somebody, and it should be your tesadi, shadangi shamanji moto, temus, but the dichi and it hadden sudenchi drobayina, and the Ranji Mika Poyaji Motobi, and it can that Chiomalis. Chioma is a 2,000 Kyandamasu, Tongo, Zudi, Ranjuki Chadamosu. It is he Kyon and Philippe Kakatel Chiesta and Misenan, and then you would.
Now, looking at the synopsis of this section in the first two lines of verse 14, it says, others and I, relying upon each other in this way, will bring about nothing but ruin. Anger and attachment only give us problems. They only give us faults rather than benefiting us. And if we mutually rely upon each other in this way with anger and attachment and so forth, it will only bring about destruction. It will not give us any benefit. So this is something that we want to recognize. We want to hold on to that understanding that if we continue to engage in those relationships in which this mutual relationship is based on anger, attachment, and so forth, it will not give us benefit. It will only destroy us.
There's that the country Pongo, that the dig and the country Pongo is now. He can Darby Marcella. Darden had the maybe shell tiny choices. He's a and Rangi Shebatembi and Pajam can do money and Susie can do Mevasa. The G. A G. Tong number Kata which in Deadi, Kata which in Deada, Yakshuris.
So have a look at the reflection on the disadvantages through understanding and knowing those disadvantages. Let's look at the way of abandoning them. So when you understand that these do not fulfill your own welfare, they also do not fulfill the welfare of others, then rather than continue to do that, keeping close company with that, just keep your distance from that. This is the way to abandon them, to stay away from those things that nourish or support our anger, attachment, and so forth.
And Suzuki Kasotaji Namju to talk to Maros. That didn't have it. Namju really. any namju maybe kalia, Tanganzu, let Tambo kalia, and Chikanji talk answer the Mano Julia, Tanquazi, kitchen berries.
So if you can guard your mind, if you're able to guard your mind, and you have wisdom that can well discern what is right and what is wrong and so forth, you're not be inclined to keep such friends. Or if you do keep such friends, at least you do that in a way that does not undermine your own wisdom, that does not bring your wisdom down. So then, looking at how do we address our ability to do that? Well, Geshe says that for us, or at least for himself as beginners, it's really important to make sure that the company that we keep will be suitable for us, rather than keeping the company of those who we are likely to develop anger, attachment, and so forth in our association with them. It's best for beginners, for the time being, to stay away from such company. So then in the way to abandon them, we begin with three lines, in the last two lines in verse 14 and the first line in verse 15. It says, they will not enact my purpose, and I too will not enact their purpose. I should flee far away from childish people. Now, looking at the meaning of this section as explained by Geshe Damarinchen, as childish ordinary individuals have not produced one's purpose, and one does not become meaningful for them, one should retreat away into isolation. So this section says, as childish ordinary individuals have not produced one's purpose, and one also does not become meaningful for them, one should retreat far away into isolation. Now, the word for isolation in Tibetan is gompa, right? So rather than understanding it as retreating into a monastery or into a gompa, it means that you retreat into a place, into an isolated place where you do not encounter those that do not fulfill or do not help you to produce your own purpose and also the purpose of others.
Then
completing the reading of verse 15, it says, when they are encountered, I should please them joyfully. I should behave well, merely ordinary, without becoming greatly familiar. The meaning here is that we should still make sure that with our body, speech, and mind, we make them happy.
Sorry.
guess in Tibetan there is kind of sort of a double meaning to making them happy. You can also say that with our body, speech, and mind, we should act in a friendly way. So then verse 16 says, in the same way a bee takes honey from a flower, I should take merely the purpose of the Dhamma and remain unfamiliar as though I've never seen all of them before.
Hadiya ngamzo kala ka ubere do aswa tindi chego chom ta ji phugi jambu ani jamji le cha chini jamji tem ka ya ji medog ji ta ji medog ya ji ya ba ji le cha medog phawon medog ya cha ba zaw ni ne ba jamji ko lenchi ani do sha ji the drugs of Jelly, method can be your current language. The Nanshingi, Nanzugi, and Sudejan Tunaya, and Suzuki, that you choose him, and current language, did Lenchi, Jilia, Yanga Tone, how to one you on Nanshingi, and taught them Jogo this. Did this song about
This is something that is so hard to practice. It is so hard to put into practice. Just like a bee is attached to the honey, when it alights upon a flower and drinks the sap from the flower, it flies away without remaining attached to the flower. In that sense, the flower becomes not even an object of memory for that bee, it just flies away. Similarly, when we meet others, we should and extract the meaning of the Dhamma based upon that encounter. Then when we meet them again, we should behave in a way as if we've never met them before.
Manana Yashura does. Kizil Lance Vigilia, Meditan, Nimbaji Lance Vigilia, and Kolayajik, semi Udojic, Maji Rangidoji. May have done never the Majibana, and it doesn't mean Mararas, child. Telico Digi, P. On the Yungi, only rub the Chongina. The Yungi, Gel Mashawena. The young give Joe and it's shaking a doing Tolia and it can do and logate it. Do the inner Rajon sent to the and sail on Jogoras. Sail on Joe, say thing made it, ring the color thing made it, signing tone, Thomas on Thomas in Jogan, Calacabra does.
This is pretty hard. If you're, as monastic, trying to live a genuine way of monasticism, sometimes when you're being treated by another person, when offering something to you, when food and so forth is being offered to you, and that is done not only once, but more than that, you also want to naturally behave in a way that pleases the one who is making offering. So then, when such relationships are formed where someone is making offering to you and then you feel that you have to make that person happy, this type of relationship is not really good if you want to kind of live a really good monastic life. So in that sense, if you think of what would be the best, well, the best would be not to come in contact with objects of desire. If you do find yourself in situations where you constantly encounter or you frequently encounter objects of desire, it becomes really hard. So think of this situation. As monastics, we are also supported by others. If, for example, you would go on alms, receiving food from another person, the next time that you see that person, if you're going to be having as if you have never met that person, as if you do not know that person, it's pretty awkward, isn't it? very difficult to actually put it into practice.
I was wondering if it actually is more like having a sense of spontaneity and no expectations of that person, so relinquishing any sort of attachment rather than
Yeah. So Chuki is wondering whether this instruction means that when you meet that person again, then have a sense of spontaneity rather than expecting something from them as with a sense of attachment. Then in that sense, behave as if you're meeting them for the first time without a sense of expectation, rather than behaving as if you've never met that person, that you don't know the person. Dila marchando do chi choi narwa tunda chi kuran tunda to la sana tawa inarwa ni mechi tuwaina ngala chi yongre ngala chi tigre ngala denda bochi nyama denda tesons masambache rewa mebetone tentambo dawo chi twegi samlo daganan shana so cheson kozo ngoshingi mendo ma chebache reto mebetone dende tewanats tunda denda jawaina
that did the digros, the two di Nanzu Pigi, Patrick Motion Shida, and Jig Tony and Don Mache Tamedo, Chaya di Tangasam, the searching on the chick. You did the Tabina, you did the Tabina. I think you Chagban Mosum, yeah, Ki Pedro, Samsung Gi. Shenang dang, and then Zemsu Shuk Chejongaya, Yasiyadam Rap, they was a song to drop. Tangi Chabang Kiale, Shuji Pig, and then Shenang dang, and then Zemsu Young Jimbaina, and it will be in so much. You know, but the Tsultrim, Nimujun song said, Nimu can't conduct Jimbain deep and Tarin Tangaya, Geshe Trojin, Chigros.
Yeah, you can also apply such meaning to the words that Shantideva expresses here. So if you have a sense of fear and a sense of restraint or avoidance from such situations, then you might from the outset try not to create situations, opportunities for those afflictions to arise. And that is consonant with what Vasubandhu said in his Abhidhamma. He said that the things that give rise to the afflictions are such things as keeping close proximity with the objects of the affliction. So when you find yourself near to the objects of the afflictions, they arise, or they can arise. So if you develop a sense of restraint, you're trying to avoid the afflictions, and you also feel anxious about the afflictions should they arise in your mind stream, one thing that you can do is try as much as you can to not find yourself in situations when those afflictions are triggered by such objects. Shazan tanda di Korea dola tandashina wodashina
Human.
no
Human.
Hakuma-san. So we'll leave the text here for now. So today is an environment day. Well, am I saying it correct? World Environment Day. Global responsibility for climate change. That's the correct way of saying that. Global. Global response to climate change. Different spiritual organizations, religious organizations around the world are taking part of activities around the world or in Australia? Around the world, sorry. Around Australia as response for climate change. So Geshe was also asked to maybe say a few words. At 12 o'clock, we have some refreshments at the cafe. So people at home, even those that live far away, please come at 12 o'clock. But after that, Lindsay and his son are going to also lead some people around the property looking at the environment here, the bush and so forth. So Geshe is wondering if those people are coming up to the Gompa or... Okay, that was the idea. Maybe they would come up at 12 o'clock.
집중이 negative.
yeah,
Yes.
no.
Yeah.
So what we'll do now is so Geshe will say a few words. So I'm not going to finish the YouTube and Zoom session now. I'm going to keep it open for people at home if you want to still remain with us. Okay. All right. Okay, so what we'll do is I will finish this Zoom session and also okay. All right, so stop the Zoom and start again the Zoom. So no, YouTube. Only on YouTube. Okay.
And then start. And then
Okay. I get it. Yeah, sorry. All right, so first of all, we're going to dedicate the virtue that we have accumulated in this session. Then I will stop the live streaming, and then start it again. Later on, as Geshe will give his talk. So you're welcome. You guys at home are welcome to still stay with us. So, sorry? No, I'll continue. It's going to be all right. All right. After I messed it up. So due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha, and indeed all transmigrated beings without exception to that state. May the precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that reason not decline, but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, O perfect and resident in Gyatso, please remain till samsara ends. You uphold the subduer's moral way, yourselves in the bountiful birth of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading my victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, protector of myself and others, your disciples, please live long.